Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com.
Good morning. In today's daily halacha, we will discuss the custom of covering the knives during benching. What is the source behind this custom? Is it a halacha? Is it a minhag? Do you have to keep it? How important is it? What are the reasons behind it? And what are its applications? Does it apply on Shabbos and Yantiv? Do you have to cover the knife? Does it suffice to cover the knife? Or do you have to remove it from the table? Do plastic knives have to be covered? So we will discuss the details of this minhag. So there's no Talmudic law that states that knives must be covered during benching. It is not a law that is stated in Shulchanaruch as part of the laws of benching, but rather it is a custom that was first mentioned in a number of Rishonim. This custom is mentioned in the Rekeach, one of the great Kabbalistic Rishonim of Ashkenaz in the 1200s, and the Abu Daram and Shibuli Aleket, and was codified lahalacha by the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 180 in halacha 5 and in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in 180-60. The Shulchan Aruch states that it's customary to cover the knife during the recital of Birchas. It's the custom of the Jewish people. It's not a halacha, it's a minhag. What is the reason behind this minhag? So we find mentioned in the Poskim numerous reasons behind this custom, and based on which reason is correct, will determine the answer to the various questions that we asked. Some say that the reason is because a table is considered similar to a mizbeach, to a shulchan, to a mizbeach. And just like by the mizbeach, there's a law that prohibited iron from being placed on it during its building, so too you shouldn't have iron knives on your table in a revealed state while you are benching. This is the reason recorded by the Magen Avram and the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch. We find a number of other reasons mentioned behind this minhag that are not recorded by the Alter Rebbe. The Beis Yosef and other places can bring from Rabbeinu Simcha a very tragic event that once happened during Birchas Hamazon, which is connected to the destruction of the temple, which we bemoaned in yesterday's fast of Asara B'Tevis, which was the beginning of the destruction, in which a certain Jew was reciting Birchas Hamazon, and upon him reaching the bracha of Uvenei Yerushalayim, he became so despondent over the memories of the Beis Hamikdash that he took the knife that was on the table and committed suicide. As a result of this tragic occurrence, the Chachamim accustomed that the knives should be removed from the table during Birchas Hamazon, so God forbid this shouldn't occur to anyone else. Another reason mentioned is because in Birchas Hamazon we mentioned the blessings that Yaakov received from his father Yitzchak, Mitala Shamayim, Misham Ne'aretz, and the knife represents the bracha of Esav, so we shouldn't have the knife of Esav revealed during the blessings of Yaakov. Another interesting reason mentioned in the Matei Moshe is that the only letter missing from benching is the Lainga Pei, the pei which is at the end of a word. And the reason is because it stands for Choron Af, which means wrath. Why is Choron Af, wrath, missing from benching? Because whoever recites Birchas Hamazon with proper concentration is guaranteed not to receive any wrath throughout his days and will have his parnasa found in plenty and in respect. And therefore we cover the knife as a knife represents wrath and retribution. Another reason mentioned is because in benching we mentioned the prayer that once again the Beis Hamikdash should be rebuilt with the coming of Mashiach, and during that time, L'yisa goel goy cherev, swords will no longer be around, and therefore we cover the knife as a sign of that matter. The practical ramification between these reasons are regarding the questions we ask. Do the knives have to be covered even on Shabbos and Yontif? Do you have to remove the knife from the table, or does it suffice to cover it? And does it apply to only iron knives or to all metals? So practically lahalacha, being that the Alter Rebbe only records the first reason we mentioned, that is because the table is similar to Mezbeach, he therefore concludes, as does the Mechaber, that on Shabbos and Yantif, the custom is not to cover the knives. And he concludes that the custom of the Jewish people is Torah, and therefore one is specifically not to cover the knives on Shabbos and Yantif. However, during the week, one is to cover the knives. However, he does not have to remove it from the table, as removing from the table is only required based on the reason that says it's to prevent someone from putting the knife into his body. However, based on the reason that it's similar to Mizbeach, it suffices to cover it. And that is the bottom line halacha, according to the Alter Rebbe. However, many other Jews are accustomed to remove the knife from the table, and not suffice in covering it. And another reason behind this is mentioned in the name of the Arizal, that people that are from the Sheish of Cain, which killed Hevel, have murderous blood inside of themselves, and it does not suffice for them to cover the knife, and they must remove it during benching. And concludes the Kaf HaChaim, being today we no longer know if we're from Cain or from Hevel, therefore we should all remove the knives, but again, according to the Alter Rebbe, this is not required, and this is the practice of Chabad Chassidim. In Mirz Hashem, in the next daily halacha, we will focus on the remaining questions that relate to covering the knife during benching. Good morning and a Shavua Tov, a Gute Woch. Today's halacha will be part 2 of the halacha we learned last week regarding covering the knives during benching. Last week we discussed the Minhag Yisrael to cover the knives during benching during the weekdays, the various reasons said in the Paiskim behind it. Today we will deal with a number of questions that relate to this minhag. Must all types of metal knives be covered? The Alter Rebbe wrote in the Shulchanaruch that one is to cover iron knives, barzel, and the reason is because iron cannot touch the mizbeach during its building process. And the shulchan is like a mizbeach, and therefore we cover iron knives. Based on that reason, it seems that all other materials of metal, such as gold, silver, or copper, don't have to be covered and can be left on the table. And so in truth concludes the Magen Avram that according to this reason, there's no necessity to cover other types of metal. However, the Pri Megadim and other Paiskim rule that you should cover all metal knives, irrelevant of the type of metal it is, being that while there's no prohibition to use other types of metal in building the Mizbeach, practically you can't use it because using a metal knife would cause a chip in the stone, and the stones of the Mizbeach had to be absolutely smooth, just like a Shechita knife. So from a practical perspective, all metal knives were invalid to be used, and for this reason, since the Shulchan is similar to Mizbeach, you should cover all knives. Certainly according to the reason of this takana, of this minhag, is because of the Jew that was despondent upon reading Birchas and took the knife into his body, then it would apply to all types of knives, irrelevant of the type of metal. Practically, the minhag is to cover all types of metal knives, even if they are not made of iron. Regarding plastic knives do not need to be covered, as they do not fall into any one of the reasons for why we need to cover the knives. It is not sharp, so it cannot harm the person, and it does not resemble metal at all, and therefore does not have to be covered, even according to the reason that the table is like a mizbeach. Another question: do you have to cover the entire knife, or does it suffice just to cover the actual blade? So there are some of today's placing the right to cover the entire knife, not just the blade. However, their source is unclear, and in this matter require further analysis. Another question: what happens if you have many knives on the table? Other people are eating on the table. So obviously, you don't have to take someone's knife from his hand and cover it. But if the knives aren't being used, do I have to make an issue of covering every single knife on the table? So some of today's place can write that the minhag is only to cover the knives that are within your proximity, that are in front of your eating area. However, the knives that are in the continuation of the table, you don't have to worry about, and you can leave them uncovered. And certainly, you don't have to cover the knife of someone else if he is still in the midst of using it. Does the knife have to be covered during Me'ein Shalish, Alamichya, Beri Nefashis? The Shel Avram Birchas writes that there's no requirement to cover it during this time, as the minhag that we accept of covering the knife is specifically related to Birchas Hamazon.